Now that we have our custom attributes set up for the fingers, it's going to be a lot easier to fix these skin weights because we can now position these fingers while we work. So what I'm going to do to start is just scrunch the index finger all the way in so I can start seeing a lot of the problem areas. I'm also going to move this thumb out of the way. And at this point, I can select the mesh and go up into the rigging tab and open up our paint skin weights tool to get started. I'm also going to close out the channel box so we have a little more space in here. And in the hierarchy, I'll scroll down and look for our index fingers, which are right here. I'm just going to start with index joint 3 and work my way towards the knuckle. So to start with the tip here, I want to make sure I have my hard brush on, and I also want to make sure my value is set all the way to 1. And I'm just going to start filling this back in and making these vertexes belong to this joint. So I'm just going to go all the way around, making sure I'm grabbing all this geometry. And I'm even going to grab the knuckle here, even though that might look a little weird when you pull it up, because when we transition to the other joints, we're going to pull that back down with a little bit less value, so we get a good transition there. And so we got this jagged knuckle here. So I'm going to go to index 2 and change my value to 0.5 for now, and just try to pull that knuckle back down to a middle point in between those two joint values. And I'll also get all the way around this edge loop here. So now we have a nice transition between that 1 value and what's going to be our joint 2 value here. So I'm going to go back up to a value of 1, and I'm going to start painting in joint 2's value in here. And that'll start to make that finger get its chubbiness back. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull all these vertexes in all the way around this edge loop, because with the next joint, I'm going to pull that geometry right back to create our transition. So we got our pointy knuckle again. So I'm going to go up to index joint 1 and change my value back down to 0.5. And I'll start to pull this knuckle back so we get our transition again. And there isn't a whole lot of geometry in the crux of this finger here. So rather than adding that transitional weight there and leaving a point on this edge loop, I'm just going to leave it fully weighted to this joint so we keep kind of like a harsh edge there. It's not too noticeable, and I think it helps maintain that volume a little better. So I'm going to move on from there, and we're going to start adding our weight into this final joint here. So I'm going to go back down to the value setting and slide that over to 1 and add a weight of 1 to this glove and all the mesh that is the end of this finger here. And hopefully we can rebuild some of that volume there. And in this position, you may notice some other artifacts, like we have some geometry being pulled by this finger on the other finger, but we really don't need to change much of that because we're going to go through each of these fingers and add a weight of 1 to all these joints. So it should pull all that geometry back and keep these fingers isolated. So that looks pretty good there. We can pull out of this tool by hitting the Q key and give it a move in our custom attribute and see what that looks like. And that's looking a little better. We're not getting any clipping under the glove or anything like that. And we're maintaining a little more of that volume. It's a little tricky with the way the geometry is, but we're doing the best we can. So I think we're ready. We can move on to the next finger. So I'm going to pull this finger all the way back, and I'm going to scrunch in the middle finger now and do that same exact process. So I'll click on the mesh, jump into the tool again, hide our channel box, and locate our joints for the middle finger in the hierarchy, and just start painting this with a value of 1 so we get the proper bending here. And once that's full, we can jump up to the middle joint 2, and we can pull that geometry down with a value of 0.5 so we get a nice knuckle bend with that edge loop there. And I'm just going to go all the way around here and give that all 0.5 before changing back to 0.1 and then filling this whole area in with that value of 1. So we thicken the finger up again. And I think that's everything there. We can actually move right along to middle joint 1 and pull our knuckle back in so we get a smooth transition. And I'm going to just touch on some of these areas in here to get a better transition. If you'd like to, you can use the smooth brush as well to get a more subtle effect. That's always something you can do. You can really do anything you want to do. But for now, I'm going to go back to the hard brush. I'm going to change back to my value of 1. And now that we're on the middle 1 joint, I'm going to stiffen up this glove and all this geometry underneath it. And as you can see, because we're using a value of 1, we're essentially reclaiming these vertices from the index finger. And now we're putting them all back on the middle finger where they belong. So that's looking a lot nicer. I'm going to pull back out, and I'm just going to grab that attribute again in the channel box and give it a couple movements just to see. So already we can see we got a little issue there. It looks like there's something in the pinky that's being controlled. I'm not going to worry about it right now. We can take care of that whenever we get to the pinky. So that is out of the way, and I'm going to move right along to the ring finger, scrunch that in, and then click on the mesh, go back to our tool, and find the ring finger joints. Gonna give this a full value of 1 in here and move on to left ring 2 joint. Switch to a value of 0.5. We're gonna pull that knuckle back. Luckily this model has a little extra edge loop here we can use for our knuckle, so when we get that bend there, we can have a nice transition. We were able to pull that stuff back down. So that's very courteous of the modeler to provide that for us. If you're ever modeling something, it's always good to have extra geometry and extra edge loops in your joints where things are bending. So I'm going to go back to a value of 1, and I'm going to fill this middle joint up with that 1 value, just like we've been doing. And then I'm even going to grab all the knuckles and stuff, because we're just going to pull that down after. And with that, I'm going to move right down to our final joint in the ring finger and give this a full value of 1, just to even out the glove a little bit. It seems like it had been collapsing and stuff. And we also want to do the 0.5 value in the knuckle, so we can pull that knuckle down, get a nice rounded knuckle shape. I'll switch back to a value of 1, just fill this all in, make sure I'm getting all the geometry that's within the glove too. That's looking pretty good there. I'm going to pull back out, going to give it another test just for safety. And I'd say that's pretty good. So I'm going to bring that little finger in, click back on the mesh, hop back into our tool, and do the same process. Make sure we have a value of 1. And we're going to color in the tip of this pinky. And we're also going to grab the joint edge loops so we can do that same process. I'm going to go to little finger 2. I'm going to give it a value of 0.5 again, round off that knuckle, and then back up to a value of 1 to beefing up this middle joint. I'm going to jump into little finger 1, and we're going to pull this knuckle back, just like before. And back up to a value of 1. Now here we can fix this issue we had. Sometimes these little edges are hard to grab, so you really got to be precise. And if it comes down to it, we can always use the component editor. So I'm going to paint this glove up and make sure I'm getting all the vertices that have to do with this finger. Definitely a little cluttered in here, but that looks okay. So I'm going to back out. I'm going to take a look at this, give this little finger a little bit of movement. And I say it looks pretty good. Now let's handle the thumb before we take care of the rest of the hand. So I'm just going to scrunch that all the way in. I'm going to grab the mesh, jump into our tool, find that thumb, and fix them. So this joint here, we're going to give a value of 1, just like before. I'm going to grab the knuckle as well. And that way when I jump up to thumb 2, I can just have a value of 0.5 here to smooth out that knuckle for us as we paint along there. So it looks pretty good. Back to a value of 1, and we're going to tighten up this glove a little bit and the geometry that's underneath it. That looks pretty good. Let's extend it to see how it looks then. It's a little hard to see in there, so I'm going to pull this out through the attribute that we made. Extend that. I'm not seeing too much clipping or anything, so I call it good. What we should probably fix now are all the weights that are kind of affecting other areas of the hand. So you can see just this thumb is actually spreading all the way up the arm, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to take our hard brush, go to a value of 0, and I'm just going to get rid of all these values for the thumb, because we should only be working on the fingers. I don't think there should be any value up here controlling anything. Even up on this part of the glove, that shouldn't move as the fingers move. So I'm just going to get rid of all this. And there's some area here on the palm that doesn't really need to move either, and it's even getting on some of the index finger here. If you feel more comfortable, you can use a smooth brush, and that'll make the transition a little more subtle so you don't get any jaggies as you're removing these weights. And I'm going to go back into the hierarchy here and go to joint 3 here and just see that there's still some more weights here that are being affected. So I'm going to remove those as well. And then I'll go to thumb 1. So thumb 1 is actually affecting quite a lot of the mesh. We want to remove that because we don't want this part of the glove moving or moving the fingers. And some of the palm I might keep because you kind of want a little bit of movement there as you move your thumb, because there's that chubby part of your thumb that's going to move naturally as you move your thumb around. So this area way off to the side isn't necessary, but this palm area is fine. So I'm just going to smoothly remove these, get a nice gradation, and then we'll give it another move just to see if we're getting any more clipping. So it looks much better. So we're not getting that extra movement in the glove, the top of the glove here, and everything's compressing well. So we've isolated the movement of these joints to that area, which is exactly what we want. And now for even more repetition, we're going to go through, just to be clean, we want to be cleanly, we're going to go through the rest of the joints here. So I'm just going to start with the index at the top, and we're going to clean up the arm and stuff where we have leftovers. Just going to quickly clean these up. And there's some here on the tip of this finger that's affecting it. So remove that. We're going to go to index 2 now. We're going to see all its issues. Not too bad. Just remove this stuff. And then we're going to go to index 3 here. And that doesn't seem to have any problem. So we can move right on down to the middle finger. Middle 3 looks fine. Middle 2 has a little bit of bleed over right here. So we'll remove that. And middle 1 is going to have some stuff up here and some stuff in the palm. And around here, I want to keep it kind of smooth because this is stuff that's going to move as you move your finger anyway. So you don't want it to be completely isolated, but you don't want it to be distracting either. And moving right along, we're going to go to the ring finger. Ring finger 3 looks okay. Ring finger 2, we're starting to see some more issues on the wrist. Not a big deal, just clean them up. And ring finger 1 is going to have most of the influence kind of bleeding out onto the wrist here. So we want to make sure we get all that stuff. It looks good. Now we just have the little finger left. So I'm going to go to little finger 3. Little finger 3 looks okay. There's some stuff. Not a problem. Just erase it. Middle finger 2's got a little more stuff going on. Just erase that stuff. And then we got little finger 1 here. Doesn't have any business being up here, so we're going to remove that stuff. There, it looks pretty good. Now let's give it a wiggle. We'll see what we're looking at. We should have removed most of the clipping. Yeah, it looks much nicer. We're not getting stuff moving on his arm or on his glove. It's all isolated. And even though repetition is really good, I especially don't want to do that all over again on the other hand. So we're just going to mirror it right across. So I'm going to select the faces of the skin and the body here, which includes the arm and the hand on the other side. Then I'm going to select the glove on each side. And just for good measure, I'm going to select these knuckle pieces on each side as well. And then I'll go into the rigging tool set here, click on that. And in the toolbar, we can select skin and we can hit mirror skin weights. And we should get the same work that we did over here on the other hand. So when we move both of these, we're seeing the same consistent movement and deformation. So the glove isn't moving where it shouldn't, and just the fingers, nice and clean, are moving the way they should. So that's looking pretty good. And now with all that finished, we're ready to move on to our final step, and that is to create our foot roll for the feet. And we'll do that next.